The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, my name is Julian Schaefer and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, How to Manage Individual and Corporate Remote Work Performance Amidst COVID-19, presented by Kevin DeVici of Bimser International. A little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise down. However, you can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar. To submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar. We will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. We are recording this presentation and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees as well as to those who registered but were not able to attend. Please take a moment at the end of the presentation to answer our one survey question. With that said, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend our webinar. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business by providing you software and industry knowledge, tools, and support whenever you need it. So whether you're here doing research for a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions throughout the webinar. Lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels, so we encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Jolie. Much appreciated. Thank you for introduction. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for connecting today's webinar session. Much appreciated. We are happy to share information and some insights with you with regards to performance management in the face of COVID-19. My name is Kevin Devecioğlu, and I'm the Managing Director of Bimser International. A little bit information about our company, just one slide, who we are, what we do. We are an enterprise software maker since 1998. We are based in New York with global presence, so we have been developing various software solutions as you see on the screen. Performance management as well as continuous improvement is one of our expertise in digital world. Since we have thousands of customers and millions of professional users, we have seen a lot and we have learned a lot in the marketplace, and we are still learning, by the way. So in this webinar session, I'd like to talk about how you can manage your performance operations remotely, especially when you are working remotely in the face of COVID-19. Today, even though we are an enterprise software maker, we are in software industry, I'd like to talk more about principles and tools that you can use when you are managing performance while working remotely at your company. My goal is to share some ideas with you in terms of principles, in terms of tools available in the marketplace, as well as give you some ideas in terms of how you can improve your business processes at your company. Also, some of the information I'll be sharing with you coming from experience and observation that we have been having in the marketplace because of our experience in quality management as well as performance management digitally. Because we have been learning from our customers, I like to share our observation and what we have been seeing and learning from the marketplace, from our customers, from experts at the same time. As you know, remote work nowadays is real. Many companies, such as Google, for example, are working remotely, and some of them, just like this company, for example, have they basically project a very long time to work remotely at their company. So that basically makes us think what's going to be the future, how it's going to be in terms of working during pandemic, after pandemic, and how we're going to, as professionals, as business owners, as companies, how we're going to basically adapt, and how we're going to basically set performance criteria for our corporations as well as our employees. So before we talk about how we can do these performance management related activities, let's think a little bit about how the market is right now and what the expectations, what the projections are at the moment. So I'd like to share some surveys with you that's actually been done in summertime, and that will basically give you an idea as to what executives, employees, employers were thinking before COVID-19, what they are thinking right now, and what they are projecting after COVID-19 in terms of remote work as well as performance management. So one of the surveys that was actually performed by PwC helps us understand what executives are thinking about remote work. So for example, one of the questions they asked was, what percent of your office employees do you anticipate will work remotely at least one day a week? So when you look at these answers, for example, before COVID-19, that was going to be remote work at least one day a week. But during COVID-19 and after COVID-19, as you see on the screen, it's actually getting more. So what it looks like is basically the expectation is that remote work will here to stay. That is what it looks like based on the survey results executed by PwC. Another question about employees. So they ask employees, how often did you work remotely before COVID-19? And how often would you like to, once COVID-19 is no longer concerned? So when you look at the first one, for example, the majority of the answers about they didn't even work remotely before. But when you look at the last question, for example, now they like to work 5 days per week more than before. So employees also getting used to the idea of working remotely. Another survey that I found on Forbes.com, for example, that was a survey and respondents, 77% of respondents are actually currently working from home. So based on this survey, 90% of respondents are open to their employers to have greater insights into their daily productivity. And at the same time, 47% of respondents say that they have been frustrated by their efforts not being recognized while they are working remotely. So all these survey results actually giving us some ideas as to what is going on in the marketplace, what employers are thinking, what employees are thinking, and when we look at the takeaways, so we understand that remote work is here to stay, but there are some challenges, especially for collaboration and communication. Employers are concerned about employees' remote work performance because you used to be able to see your employees, your team members, in the same office, same work area, same work environment. But right now, we cannot see that. So everyone is working remotely. So how are you going to manage the performance? So that's a concern for most of the employees. As for employees, they want to have the option of working remotely, maybe partially, maybe totally, based on the survey results that we just saw in my previous slide. Employees are okay for employers to have greater insights and visibility regarding how they perform their tasks. And another takeaway is basically employees are not happy about not being recognized for their work and effort while they are working remotely. So these basically survey and these takeaways give us ideas as to what employees are thinking, what employees are thinking, and what the expectations are overall. And highly likely these are also similar at your company as well. So based on these surveys and based on the executives, employers, and employees' expectations and thoughts, let's talk about performance management in the face of COVID-19. In this session, our approach is basically digital transformation and quality management while we are addressing performance management. As I mentioned earlier, we won't be talking about technologies specifically, and I'd like to talk about, first of all, some concepts. What is digital transformation and what is quality before we talk about performance management a little bit. So digital transformation is adapting an organization's strategy and culture to capture opportunities enabled by technology. So when you look at this definition, actually, it's not solely about technology. It's about leadership. How are you going to help your organization adapt its strategy and structure to capture opportunities enabled by technology. So leadership is key based on these definitions that I got it from Harvard Business Review. And how about quality? What is quality? Quality is defined by Philip Crosby, a quality guru. He defines that quality is conformance to requirements. So understanding what the requirements are and conforming to it. That is what the quality is based on Crosby's definition. And the cost of quality is expense of doing things wrong. As another concept for us to think about. So we have digital transformation, adapting our strategies, our company's organization strategy and structure to capture opportunities enabled by technology. And we have also quality that we need to think about conforming to requirements. So let's talk about quality management a little bit while we are getting ready to talk about tools that we can use for performance management. In terms of quality management, when we think about quality management, we basically get ISO as a reference. ISO is the holy grail. It's the foundation of all quality management systems in the world. When we say quality management is not only about manufacturing. It's actually a business management system, and it has certain principles that we need to take into consideration. What are those principles? There are 7 principles of quality management. That also includes performance management, of course. So one of them is, for example, being customer focused. Each organization, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, they have to be customer focused. They have to listen to the customers, they have to understand their requirements, and they have to conform to it. That's quality. And leadership. Leadership is in the soul of any organization. It's also in the soul of digital transformation. It's also in the soul, in the center piece of the quality management system as a whole. So we need leaders at our companies to set the goals, set the vision, and motivate employees and team members to reach corporate objectives and individual objectives. We need to engage people. When we say people, they may be our team members, they may be stakeholders, stockholders, customers, communities, for example. So we need to be engaging with them, communicating with them, collaborating with them clearly in a constructive way. And based on ISO, based on the quality management principles of ISO, which is also available, by the way, on ISO's website. I just put the link in the bottom. You can download it. It's available for public. So ISO takes any companies, any corporations, operations by process. So that it has the process approach. So while you are running your business, you have certain activities, maybe certain tests that you do for sales, for purchasing, for marketing, maybe for production. You need to break it down into processes, into pieces. So that is what the process approach is. And improvement is key. So based on the quality management principle, we need to look for 3 major things: customer satisfaction, safety in our work environment as well as in our products, and also continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is key because there is always room for improvement. Nobody is perfect. No organization is perfect. So there is always a way to improve our operations. That may be our approach to our work. That may be the process that we are executing, for example. So improvement is in continuous improvement is also critical piece of quality management as a principle. When making decisions as managers, as employees, as team members, evidence-based decision making is key. We need to have the evidence, we need to have the data in front of us to make the right decisions. And relationship management. We need to manage our relationship with our team members, with our stakeholders, with communities, to have a better future as organization as well as communities. So these basic quality management principles dictate how we should also manage and how we should also craft our performance management criteria in the long run. And one of the things that we can use, one of the tools, one of the approaches that we can always use is plan, do, check, act cycle. So from this slide forward, I'll be talking about certain tools that you can actually utilize when you are managing performance operations at your organization as well as among your employees. So plan part is basically you need to establish objectives and goals and processes to deliver results based on your observation, based on the requirements, basically, to conform to it. And do pieces is basically to execute the process and collect data while we are executing. And we plan it, we do it, we execute it, and then we check, we study how the actual results versus expected results are. So we need to understand how we are doing so that we can maybe run root cause analysis to improve processes, perhaps. And based on these studies, we need to act. We need to, based on the improved processes, we need to act, we need to take actions based on what we learn in study steps. And we need to also go through the cycle again and again if necessary. So this cycle is actually ongoing. So we always plan, we always perform, we always check how we're doing, and then we act on it, and then we plan again, and then we do it again. So this is a continuous process. That's why it's called a cycle, because it's actually ongoing. As I mentioned earlier, based on the quality management principles, there is always a room for improvement. And for this, you need to keep studying, you need to keep learning, and you need to keep improving. So that is actually a mindset for any successful organization, as we see in the marketplace. Any successful organization needs to plan, needs to execute, check how they are doing, and then act upon improving processes. This cycle is also called Deming circle. Deming is one of the quality gurus, just like Philip Crosby. So when we look at the performance management, we need to model our business process. We need to define our performance criteria. We need to assign it to team members, and we need to also monitor the performance in an ongoing way. And at the end, we need to review the performance. We need to study it, and we need to see how we can improve it, so that we can continue doing it in a better way. That is basically the goal. So in the defined phase, when we are defining the process, we need to define our business processes. So it's called actually business process modeling. What we do is basically at each process, as I mentioned earlier, based on the quality management system and principles, each each department's operations are actually processes. And you break them down into how you're gonna take steps to execute your tasks. So there are different tools that you can use for business process modeling in the marketplace. So flowchart is one of them. So the one on the screen is, for example, a sample of a flowchart, very simplistic. Another tool that's actually very common in the marketplace is Gantt chart. It helps you also manage your business process modeling activities. PERT charts are also very, very common as well, as to design your business processes. And there are also other tools such as business process modeling notation, universal process notation, and there are many other tools. These are very common ones. As we see in the marketplace, that as we have been engaging with the companies and organizations, flowcharts, Gantt charts, and PERT charts are the most common ones that we have been seeing in the marketplace. And I think the most very well-known ones, I must say. So the critical thing is when we are modeling our business processes, we need to always attach policies and procedures as documents to each process steps that we are taking. And at the same time, we need to also define risks of each step that we need to take during the execution of that process. So policies and procedures, basically, they are live. They may change from time to time. You may need to version them for continuous improvement. So whatever is the latest version of your policy or procedure based on your operations, and it needs to be basically with the process modeling tool available for employees. So let's keep it in mind. Quality management system, as I mentioned earlier, as principles, that is to help you improve your processes, and that is to help you have a system in place. The system is to help you have a sustainable business model. So regardless of who is doing that particular work, documents and records will be there. So whoever actually takes place of another employee, for example, you'll have the system in place. Someone can read the policies, read the procedures and protocols, and learn about how to do the job that needs to be actually get done at your company, which is actually very, you actually create your corporate memory in a way, regardless of who is the operator. The corporate memory is there. You can read, you can study, you can learn, and you can keep doing it. That is also good for the company's sustainable business model. That's why the business process modeling is important as well for performance management. First, we model it, we define it, we explain it, so that anyone who's gonna perform the test based on our performance criteria can follow these instructions clearly. That is the critical piece of performance management. That is the definition part of the process. So another tool that we can use while we are defining our processes is called turtle diagram. That is also very common among quality management professionals, as we see in the marketplace. This tool is basically to help you visualize your process characteristics. Processes are made up of input, output, and criteria, for example. And turtle diagram helps you have a visualized view of the process to assist you and analyze the business process that you have at your organization. It looks like a turtle, really, as how it is designed virtually. The idea is to basically have you analyze your processes, what type of inputs needed, what is going to be the criteria, and what's going to be the expected output. That's also very common among quality management professionals, as I mentioned earlier. This also diagram is also available on ASQ's website. ASQ stands for American Society for Quality. They have a lot of tools that you can review for performance management as well as process management on their website. It's available for public. So once we define our processes, once we design our business processes, the next step is to basically set performance goals. We need to set our goals, we need to set our objectives. Right? So SMART is something very familiar for many professionals, basically. So I need to just go over it a little bit. So we need to make sure our goals maybe for corporations, right, or maybe for our company, goals for our departments, for employee performance, maybe for employee development, or goals maybe for leadership, or goals maybe for managers, for example. So regardless of whose goals will be, we need to make sure goals are basically specific, they are measurable, they are attainable, they are relevant, and they are time-based. So if I like to basically acquire 20,000 new customers using mobile app at an average cost per acquisition of $30 with an average profit of $10 by the end of the year, that's pretty smart if you think about it. It's an example. So you can also put together an example of your performance goals or objectives based on these criteria. So it has to be smart, it has to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based so that you can measure it accordingly. So you basically lay down the foundation of your business process. You define them, and then you define your performance goals and objectives, and then you monitor them regularly on daily basis, on weekly basis, on monthly basis. It's very critical. And then you need to communicate how you are doing, how the departments are doing. Let's remember, when we are designing our performance management criteria, it starts with our corporation's goals and objectives. You know, where we like to be, how we can reach that goals, with what type of objectives we can achieve those goals. So once you have your corporate goals in place, then you can break it down into departments. And each department head of the department can also break it down into team members. So individuals have individual roles, individual performance criteria. Departments have their own performance criteria, and all the departments basically contribute to the organization's overall performance goals. That is basically how the breakdown is when you think about it in the big picture. And another thing we need to think about is performance review and continuous improvement. So again, our framework is do, check, act, plan. That is the cycle that I just mentioned earlier. So based on this cycle that's ongoing, by the way, so we plan it, we do it, we check it, we act on it, and then we plan again, we do it, so it's ongoing. So based on that, we also need to, of course, think about performance reviews. That is part of the check part of the PDCA cycle. So based on the performance review, we need to have certain feedback. So how we are doing. I need to get certain feedback as to how I am doing so that I can take steps to improve it. So feedback is critical. These feedbacks may be 360-degree feedback. I may need to talk to my team members, I may talk to my vendors, my customers, right? So basically there may be a multi-level, multi-angle feedback, for example. Another tool that we always use and we always see in the marketplace is surveys. So performance of our corporation, let's say. How do we know how we are doing? So we need to ask our customers how we are doing. We need to ask our vendors how we are doing. So surveys are also critical to get feedback. Suggestions from team members, suggestions from vendors, customers also help us get feedback as to how we are doing regarding our performance. And also audits. Audits are very common, as we see in the marketplace all the time. Audits may be internal audits. I may be auditing my team members in different departments. They may be auditing me. The idea is to basically how the department is doing how the department is following the policies and procedures that is defined in the business process modeling phase, and then how we can actually improve processes. There is always room for improvement, and based on the quality management principles, we are always looking for ways to improve our business process and our individual performance level. So that is why audits are very important. Sometimes we can also get an external audit. These audits may be run by a third party, and they can also get a chance to basically review how you are doing your job, how you're doing your work, and how you're operating. And based on their feedback, you can also have some ideas as to how you can have a continuous improvement in place, how you can actually improve your process. Once we get the feedback, we can actually analyze and study the feedback that we are getting through surveys, through interviews, through audits, and other ways to get from the sources. If that's individual performance review, of course, we get it with our superior, with our team members, for example. If that's for the corporation, as we are managing the performance in the face of COVID-19, then we may use additional tools such as surveys, suggestions, and internal external audits, for example, to get feedback. Once we get the feedback, we study them. And then during the study, one of the things that we need to consider is root cause analysis. There are various tools that is being used in the marketplace for root cause analysis. And they are typically 5 why analysis, Ishikawa, or it's also called fishbone analysis, 8D analysis approach, and another one is called Pareto. Pareto is basically 80% of the result coming from 20% of the effort, right? So that's actually very common as we know it. It's most of the time is the case, interestingly. So you can also analyze it, and you can also document it and study it based on Pareto principles. Then we think about quality management community overall and what they use in the marketplace typically. Most of the quality management teams and improvement teams, we see they use a lot of them use 5 why and Ishikawa tools. 5 why is sounds very easy as to keep asking why as to regarding a certain issue or challenge that you are facing, for example, or feedback that you have been getting. But it actually really makes you think as a team, as an individual, as a department, for example, how you can take steps to improve processes, how you can define it, and how you can take steps to improve it. Ishikawa is also very popular, very common among quality professionals. So with a fishbone style design is to defining the challenges and the feedback, and then coming up with certain ideas as to how you can improve the places, operations, for example. All of these 5 whys, Ishikawa, 8D, and Pareto analysis, they are available at ASQ's website, American Society for Quality. They have a library where you can actually visit and learn more about it. It's a pretty good resource for you to access. It's available for public, and it's very rich in terms of what is being offered. But at the same time, I like to also share what we have been seeing in the marketplace as to what is commonly used to improve processes. Once we have the root cause analysis in place, based on the feedback, we perform root cause analysis. And then based on the results, we may need to take certain corrective action. So corrective actions is basically, they used to be called preventive and corrective actions. Nowadays it's called corrective actions. So the idea is to basically improve processes for corporation to have a better performance, improve processes for individuals to have a better performance level, for example. So as I mentioned earlier, there is always room for improvement. And based on the quality management principles, we need to improve our processes as individuals, as professionals, as well as corporations. We need to find ways to improve our operations. That's why corrective actions are very important. So not only you are taking steps to improve your business processes, or as an individual, the way that you do your work, the way that you perform your tasks, you also document it. That is actually critical piece of quality management. So you need to have, that's why it's important to have a quality management system in place so that you can document your corrective actions. Once you document it, you basically perpetuate your actions. So today you are here at the company, tomorrow someone else may take your place and you may be promoted to another department, for example, in the organization. So that someone else come take your place and then they can follow your footsteps as to what type of root cause analysis took place at your organization, what type of corrective actions that you took and with explanation. So that's why the documentation is key to make sure performance reviews are here to stay, and any steps that we take for continuous improvement help organization improve processes. So once we take the corrective actions, and I'll give you an example. Let's say you'd like to improve your manufacturing operations, let's say, right? And certain actions that you take as corrective actions, let's say training. So you need to train more in your at your organization. So if that is the corrective action, that regular training for certain activities, for example, you need to also communicate this corrective action with team members, and you need to also perform on it. Okay, so that is why communication as well as training is very important to make sure corrective actions really take place. It doesn't just stay on paper. You really put it to work, and that's where actually the challenge comes, especially when you are working remotely. Because if you are working remotely, you may not see your team members physically in the same work environment. So you need to find a way to communicate it with the team members. And we'll talk about ways to communicate as well, communicate and collaborate, which is an important challenge that we are facing nowadays. And then we need to repeat this cycle, basically. We need to plan, we need to do, we need to check, we need to act, and then we need to plan again, we need to do it, we need to check, we need to study, we need to perform root cause analysis, and we need to act on it again. So that's basically an ongoing process. It's a cycle for continuous improvement. One of the tools also I like to talk about is called balanced scorecard. So ISO's quality management system and the quality management principles I mentioned earlier, seven principles, I call them strong 7. So that basically touches every part of your organization except accounting and finance. So let's say you are practicing ISO 9001, or let's say you are certified by ISO 9001. That means you are following those 7 principles I mentioned earlier. And basically you have a quality management system touches every part of your organization: sales, marketing, distribution, shipping, production, quality control, except finance and accounting, because ISO doesn't touch those parts of the operations except finance part. So that is why I like to talk about a little bit about balanced scorecard. It is because it is also talking about financial part of your corporate goals and performance, basically. So it is basically it has 4 major parts: the financial perspective, customer perspective, growth and learning perspective, especially for employees, their skills, their turnover, as well as their education, for example, and internal process perspective, how you are actually managing your quality control, how you are managing your resources, how you allocate them, and inventory management, for example. So this tool is very complementary to your quality management principles, those 7 principles, and these balanced scorecards. When you think of them together, they're actually very complementary, especially from the corporate performance point of view. Very complementary. And also we see it also in organizations, especially when the organization is getting when the organization is growing. If that's a growing organization, it may be a small organization or a mid-sized organization, or an enterprise organization, for example. So typically we see it in the mid-market at growing organizations. They think that they need to manage their corporate performance with certain methodology. So balanced scorecard is helpful in that sense. So you have the template, you have the steps to take as to define your business processes, as to define your corporate goals, and then you basically put it in this framework to basically easy to understand way. And this is basically run. Typically we see it it's run quarterly, in half of the year, and also annually. That is basically the frequency that is see in different organizations. Some of the organizations run these and review this on monthly basis. Typically, performance management, especially the review and actually monitoring, is actually ongoing, right? It's actually a daily test if you think about it. This is just to help you see the big picture with this framework called balanced scorecard. But the scope here is especially the corporate performance management rather than individual performance management. So let's talk about using technology a little bit. This is the only piece that I'll talk about technology a little bit in this presentation. So until now, we talked about what type of what type of steps that you need to take for performance management, regardless of corporate or individual performance, for example. So we start with define it. We also model our business processes, and then we define our objectives and goals based on SMART criteria, as I mentioned earlier, and then we regularly monitor it, and then we study. When we are studying, we need to also get feedback, right, from our team members, from our employers, or maybe for corporations, we need to also get feedback from our stakeholders, perhaps. And then we need to study with root cause analysis, especially to make sure we are taking steps to improve our processes. And then once we take corrective actions for improvement, we need to communicate those. And that's why I need to talk about the communication piece here using technology. That's actually the most important part, because yes, you may be running the plan, do check X cycle, but at the same time, you need to also communicate the outcome, basically, and our performance reviews. And if we are taking corrective actions for continuous improvement, we need to make sure we actually communicate this with our team members. So nowadays, cloud technology is more important than before. There is effect. Before, we saw in the marketplace a lot of on-premise server, as we call it. You have basically a server at your organization, you use it. That was actually very common, which is still the case. However, we see more cloud-based operations going on nowadays, because with the help of cloud technology, you can access your data from anywhere. Let's remember, you may have your computers, you may have your servers, wherever you go or wherever your organization is. The most important thing is the data, the information that you generate. That's what is actually the most important piece on cloud or on your servers. So we need to make sure any data that we collect, we need to save it, and we need to secure it in a safe place. Not only maybe in one place, in maybe multiple places, but it comes with security protocols and priorities. So data is the key. And cloud and servers, they are basically tools that we use to manage and protect and utilize our data. Emails have been around for a long time, nothing new, and we are still using it. However, the email traffic is higher than before nowadays. That's also a fact. Instant messages, as we use it nowadays, messengers and other tools, for example, that we have been using, is also very common and very useful for instant messaging. Video conferencing, so we Zoom, we do GoToMeeting and other tools, for example, that is very common nowadays to communicate. There is a concept called Zoom fatigue nowadays. We have a lot of video conference going on, which is becoming challenging, because we have right now more meetings than before via Zoom or other video conferencing tools, for example. As I mentioned earlier, the connection, especially the secure connection, is also very important while we are communicating any performance related or any continuous improvement related activity among our team members as well as our stakeholders. So there is data, we have them on cloud, we have them on on-premise servers, but we need to make sure when we are communicating with the data, we need to make sure we have secure connection. So cybersecurity is another thing that we need to think about. It's not the subject of today's conversation, but we need to also consider that while especially we are sharing files and documents. So based on our experience, right now we have more than 2,000 customers, more than 2 million professional users. Based on what we have seen so far, as our observation as a corporation, as Bimser International, the successful managers and business leaders, those that we see in the marketplace, they are the ones using the workflow management the best. The better you control your organization, the better you can lead your troops, your team members. You can make sure you always have the continuous improvement in place. And that is what we have been observing, by the way. All these managers that we have seen in different companies, all the business leaders that we have seen, those are the ones grabbing the center of the heart of the organization and manage the organization with workflow management software. That's what we have been seeing. Also, I talked about earlier in my conversation, modeling business processes before setting the criteria, corporate performance criteria, as well as individual criteria. So business process modeling, there are business process modeling software products available, so they may also be helpful for you. The complex part of business process modeling is gathering things together. So let's say you are using as simple as a flow chart. Okay, so you are basically designing a flow chart to, let's say, describe, let's say, sales process. Okay, so let's say, or a customer complaint, for example. So the first thing you're gonna do is, for example, validating customer complaint. You get a phone call, you get an email, so you need to communicate with the customer to make sure that it's a validated customer complaint. That's real. That's, something that you need to take seriously. So you get information to validate it, and then you basically design an investigation team, and then you take steps to see, what happened, what went wrong, based on the customer complaint. Right? So these are steps as an example for business process modeling. However, every single step that you are taking for customer complaint management, for example, you need to define the risk, and you need to also link the documents that's related to each step. So in this particular case, customer complaint management, so each step needs to have the protocols, policies, and procedures linked to the flow that you are designing. So the more flow, the more flow that you have requires more risk assessment data, more documents to be added to that flow chart that you are designing. That's what the complex part is. But if your organization doesn't have that complex issue, if you don't have many flows, you may use it in a more simplistic way, perhaps. But if there are a lot of processes that you deal with, and you need to break it down in pieces, of course, for performance management, then a software may be helpful. And same with the performance management. So it is, again, all about leadership, and it's all about the quality principles in the scope of digital transformation, as I mentioned earlier. So in that scope, when you are managing your performance operations, your corporate performance as well as your individual employee performance, there are different tools that you can use to document it. So the performance management can be actually executed in different forms. The reason we use software is to make sure we basically record the data in a digital environment without the need of paper, and you can pull it anytime with reports and other details, regardless of where you are. Especially if you are using a cloud technology, it's much easier for you. So that is something that we need to think about. If you notice, I've been talking about performance management in the scope of quality management principles. So quality management is a mindset, and we believe in ISO quality management system and standards. As a company, we are also ISO 9001 certified ourselves, so we practice it on a daily basis. So having that quality management system in place, and documenting and complying with ISO 9001 requires a lot of work, basically. And while you are creating that corporate memory based on ISO 9001 quality management principles, you are actually accumulating a lot of documents and policies, procedures, corrective actions. It becomes unmanageable after years of work, because those records that you have, they are not static, they are actually dynamic. You keep improving them, you keep updating them, because there is continuous improvement in the soul of quality management principles. So they may also be helpful to have a software to manage the quality management as well as compliance operations, something to think about. But however, there is no requirement on ISO part. ISO doesn't require you to use software, doesn't require you to use spreadsheet. There is no definition, or there is no requirement in ISO. ISO just asks you to design your quality management system, maybe on paper, maybe on spreadsheets, maybe on Word files, or maybe by using professional software products. That is your choice, but the important thing is to make sure that is the continuous improvement is there, and you improve your corporations as well as individual performance at your organization. So that is the critical thing that you need to keep in mind. Okay, great. I think I covered my part. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll now open it up for questions. If you have any questions, please enter them into the questions section of your GoToWebinar, and we'll give that a minute in case any come through. And just a reminder, everyone, we do have a subject matter expert here. This is a great opportunity to have your questions answered in real time. And it doesn't look like we've had any that come through, so thank you so much, Kevin, for your informative presentation and for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you for having me.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.